Today was a special day. Today, Froggy the Gator and Baby the Gator were riding with their dad to the farm. What farm, you ask? Well, this particular farm was just a few miles outside of Gator Grove, and one of Daddy the Gator's oldest friends, Farmer Wilbur, ran the farm. And on this farm, Farmer Wilbur grew hay for horses, he grew corn, and he also had an apiary where bees made honey. "I can't wait to see the farm," Froggy the Gator said, as he and his brother and his dad piled in the car. In case you didn't know, Froggy the Gator really loved farm equipment. He loved trucks, he loved tractors, he loved construction equipment, he loved trains. Basically, he loved anything that could go. And he knew that today, at Wilbur's farm, he was going to see some awesome farm equipment. After about 30 minutes in the car, Daddy the Gator and the two boys pulled up to Wilbur's farm. Wilbur was already outside waiting for them, and he waved to them as they approached the beginning of the driveway and beckoned them up toward his house. When they got to the house, that's when Froggy saw it. That's when he saw the biggest, the hugest, the coolest, greenest tractor that he had ever seen. Wilbur immediately noticed Froggy staring at the big green tractor. "Pretty cool, isn't it, Froggy?" Wilbur asked. "Would you like to get up on the tractor and sit in the driver's seat?" Froggy could not believe his luck. He could not believe that Wilbur would invite him to do such a great thing. "Really?" Froggy said. "You mean it?" Wilbur nodded, and Froggy looked at his dad to make sure it was okay with him too. "Go ahead, son," Daddy the Gator said. "Here, I'll help you up." And just like that, Daddy the Gator and Farmer Wilbur helped lift Froggy up onto the driver's seat of the huge green tractor. As Froggy sat down, he looked around. Again, I can't emphasize this enough. The tractor was huge. It was probably 10 feet off the ground. And Froggy looked out through the front window and he saw a big, wide open field as far as the eye could see ahead of him. "How is it up there?" Wilbur asked. "This is great," Froggy said. "I love it up here." But just then, as he was looking around and admiring the huge tractor, Froggy noticed something. As we all know, Froggy the Gator has quite the imagination, and it gets especially active whenever there's large machinery involved. And well, today was of course no exception. So as Froggy looked around and admired the tractor, he noticed that way off in the distance, something was not right. Off in the distance, Froggy saw Wilbur's scarecrow waving at him. Froggy decided that he had to figure out what was the matter. So in his imagination, he drove the big tractor over to the scarecrow. As he pulled up to the scarecrow, Froggy asked, "Hey there, Mr. Scarecrow. It looks like something's wrong. Is there anything I can do to help?" Oh, thank goodness you're here," the Scarecrow said. Yes, please, we need your help. You see, the bees that live on this farm have been really busy making honey. But today, they're all asleep. All of the bees. I went to check on the apiary, and all the bees in the hive were just sitting there sleeping, and I couldn't wake them up. Can you help wake them up so they can get back to making their honey? Froggy the Gator's eyes got serious. "I'm glad you found me," he said. "I know exactly what to do. Hop on up here in the tractor and take me to the bees. I'll make sure they wake up." So the Scarecrow jumped in the tractor, doing a huge forward flip on the way up. Scarecrows don't weigh very much, so he could easily do this type of maneuver. And as soon as the Scarecrow was settled in the tractor, they were off. After a few minutes, they found themselves at the apiary. And sure enough, just like the Scarecrow had said, all the bees were fast asleep. All Froggy could hear was the buzzing sound of bee snores. "Hang on tight, Scarecrow," Froggy said. "I got this." And Froggy pulled out a huge imaginary boombox. "You see, you're in luck, Scarecrow," Froggy the Gator said. "This boombox has my famous bee wake-up song ready to play. This song will get them moving, it will get them dancing, and it will get them back to making honey in no time," Froggy said. Then, Froggy held the boombox high above his head and let the bee music wash over the hives. Sure enough, after a few seconds, the bees all flew out of their hives together, and they started doing a choreographed, that means in unison, which means all together at the same time. The bees started doing a choreographed bee dance way up high in the air. "Onward, bees," Froggy shouted. "Go and resume your honey making." And with that, the dancing bees all flew together to a nearby flower patch, where they collected the juice and the pollen from the flowers and took it back to their hive to make Farmer Wilbur's famous, delicious honey. "Oh my goodness, thank you, thank you, thank you," the Scarecrow said. "You saved the day, Froggy the Gator. How can I ever repay you?" "Well, Scarecrow," Froggy replied, "it's funny you say that, because I sure would love some of that delicious honey for myself. Do you think that I could have some to eat?" And as he said that, suddenly, Froggy snapped back into the real world. The Scarecrow and the dancing bees and the hive all disappeared, and Froggy was back on top of the tractor, right where he'd started. Froggy the Gator looked down and saw Daddy the Gator, right where Froggy had left him, along with Farmer Wilbur and Baby the Gator. And just then, Daddy the Gator called up to Froggy. "Come on down here, son, and try some of Farmer Wilbur's honey. It is the best you'll ever have in your life." Daddy the Gator helped lift Froggy the Gator down from the tractor. Then he gave him a spoon covered in Farmer Wilbur's famous honey. Froggy the Gator and Baby the Gator cheers to their spoons together, and they walked away from the big huge tractor to enjoy the rest of their day on the farm. Froggy the Gator could not wait. This was going to be a great day. He was on his way with his dad and with Mommy the Gator and with Baby the Gator to visit Farmer Wilbur's farm. In case you forgot, Farmer Wilbur is one of Daddy the Gator's oldest friends, and he owns a farm where he grows hay, corn, and bees. The farm also happens to have all of the coolest farm equipment you've ever seen. And whenever Froggy the Gator went to visit, he got to ride on the farm equipment, with Daddy the Gator and Farmer Wilbur's help, of course. But he got to ride on the farm equipment, and it was so much fun to get on big tractors and big harvesters and all other kinds of real farm equipment that Froggy looked forward to these trips more than anything else. Today, Farmer Wilbur was hosting a barbecue. He was cooking a whole pig in his smoker, and when Froggy and his family arrived, Froggy could smell the delicious smells wafting through the air. "Come on back, guys," Farmer Wilbur said to Froggy and his family as they drove up the driveway. As Froggy walked past the farm equipment, he imagined himself riding on the big tractor, taking it across the land and encountering all manners of animals and plants and mysteries. But then, his thoughts were interrupted by the unmistakable sound of a strumming banjo. As Froggy rounded the corner into Farmer Wilbur's backyard, he saw it. A three-piece bluegrass band, already in full swing, playing rousing music and stomping their feet. "What instruments are those, Dad?" Froggy asked Daddy the Gator. "Well, one's a banjo, son. You know that one. Then that small-looking guitar is actually called a mandolin. And that big, huge, stand-up-looking violin is a bass. Now, these guys sound great. I bet they practice a lot." Froggy the Gator zeroed in on the banjo. The twang and the rhythm set his imagination into overdrive. All of a sudden, Froggy the Gator found himself somewhere completely different. All of a sudden, he found himself in a dimly lit shack. Froggy the Gator looked outside the windows of this shack, and instead of seeing the rolling fields of Farmer Wilbur's farm, he saw a vast, bubbling, and steaming swamp. Then Froggy the Gator turned his attention to the center of the shack. There were dozens of other people there, all crowded around a big stage. And on the stage, there was a man making an announcement over a microphone. Froggy listened as he spoke. "Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the famous Bayou Banjo Showdown, here in the Bayou Swamps of the Gulf." The crowd cheered, and Froggy realized he'd somehow transported to another place entirely. He had somehow transported to the bayou, where he happened to know that alligators hung out. The announcer continued on with his announcements. "Today's Banjo Showdown will be between two contestants. The rules are, both players will have a chance to play the banjo, and the crowd will select a winner. And the winner will be crowned the Bayou Banjo Champion." The crowd cheered some more. "I wonder who's competing today," Froggy thought to himself, as he moved closer to the stage to get a better look. Then the announcer continued his remarks. "Now, to announce today's competitors, ladies and gentlemen, first we have the reigning Bayou Banjo Champion. It's none other than Swampwater Gershwin." The crowd erupted, and Froggy saw none other than his old stuffed alligator, Gershwin. Now, as everybody listening to this probably knows, Gershwin was one of Froggy the Gator's best friends in the real world. He was a stuffed animal who kept him company at night. But in Froggy's imagination world, Gershwin was often his foil. And so Froggy watched as Swampwater Gershwin strutted up onto the stage with his banjo around his neck, ready to take on the competition. The announcer let the crowd cheer before he continued on. "And our challenger, taking on the reigning champion, Swampwater Gershwin, joining us straight from Gator Grove by way of Wilbur's farm, our first-time competitor, young Froggy the Gator." The announcer pointed directly at Froggy. The spotlight from the stage turned onto his face, and the entire crowd started staring in Froggy the Gator's direction. "Oh my gosh," Froggy thought nervously to himself. "Me? Why me? I have to face Swampwater Gershwin in a banjo showdown?" But then Froggy remembered his dad's words. Even though he was nervous, even though he was scared to get on stage, Daddy the Gator always said, "Son, leaders and winners know when it's time to rise to the occasion. And when that time comes, they're ready." So Froggy walked up on stage and grabbed his imaginary banjo and prepared for the showdown. All at once they were off. Swampwater Gershwin went first. He strummed his banjo furiously, and the crowd loved it. Notes sprang forward from every direction, twanging and plucking and harmony and melody all at once. Gershwin was good. Froggy knew he was going to have to bring his A game. Once Gershwin was finished, the crowd cheered wildly. "Next up," said the announcer, "Froggy the Gator will take his turn." The crowd all of a sudden went silent in anticipation. The light from the stage shone fiercely in Froggy's eyes, and he began to play. Froggy the Gator didn't know what was happening, but somehow the notes just sprang from him. His fingers and his brain were working in perfect unison. He knew exactly what to do. He knew exactly what to play. It was like he had always known. It was like it had always been within him. And he expertly strummed and twanged as he won the crowd over, and they cheered and chanted for more. As Froggy finished his banjo solo, the crowd kept cheering. He couldn't believe it, and neither could Swampwater Gershwin. The announcer took to the microphone. "Ladies and gentlemen, our clear winner from Gator Grove, by way of Wilbur's Farm, it is Froggy the Gator!" And as the crowd cheered, Froggy received his golden banjo trophy, and he was crowned reigning champion of the Bayou Banjo competition. As Froggy celebrated and held his hands high above his head, something in the real world snapped him out of his imagination world. It was that unmistakable and delicious smell of the roasted pig on Wilbur's pig cooker. He looked around, and he was back on the farm, and Daddy the Gator was walking toward him with a plate of Wilbur's food. "Come on, son, let's sit down and eat and enjoy the bluegrass music," Daddy the Gator said. "Sure thing, Dad," said Froggy. "Thanks for the plate." And Froggy sat with his family, listening to the music and imagining his next chance to defend his title as the Bayou Banjo champion. Froggy the Gator, Mr. Hummus, Wormbird, and Baby the Gator were all headed with Daddy the Gator to visit Farmer Wilbur's farm. In case you forgot, Farmer Wilbur is one of Daddy the Gator's oldest friends, and they get to visit his farm often and check out all of his cool farm equipment. Froggy has had countless adventures riding Farmer Wilbur's big tractor and exploring the farm where he grows hay, corn, and bees. But today was even more special, because today, Farmer Wilbur was hosting his famous annual means it happens once per year. Farmer Wilbur was hosting his famous annual classic train exposition at the farm. You see, there was a set of old train tracks that ran right past Farmer Wilbur's farm. And so every year, classic train enthusiasts would come from miles around and check out the old trains that came and shined up and got displayed at the exposition. When the boys arrived, they knew immediately that they were in for a treat that day. There were trains all around. The farm's golden fields were filled with what looked like towering iron giants to the boys. They saw big, shiny steam cargo trains with smokestacks reaching up into the air like a top hat, and they saw powerful locomotive passenger trains with wheels as big as wagon wheels. They saw an all-black diesel locomotive, sleek and powerful. They saw rusty red cabooses 100 years old, and some of the trains were even turned on, with puffs of smoke rising into the sky, making the whole farm smell like a campfire. "This is incredible, fellas," Froggy the Gator said. "I know," said Mr. Hummus. "I've never seen so many trains all in one place. I wish we could ride them all." And just then, just as Mr. Hummus was imagining riding all of the trains, something caught Froggy's eye over in the corner of the exhibition field. There he saw a small engine, smaller than the rest, neglected, all by itself. Something about the lonely engine made Froggy curious. He waved over to Farmer Wilbur. "Hey, Farmer Wilbur, what's going on with that train over there all by itself?" "Oh, you mean Old Engine Robert," Farmer Wilbur said. "Well, the Engine Robert is one of the oldest trains here. He doesn't get the attention that the new trains get, and he's always been kind of a troublemaker. He seems to have a mind of his own, that Old Engine Robert," Farmer Wilbur said. Interesting, Froggy the Gator thought to himself, and the boys walked closer to Engine Robert and started thinking about all of the rides he's seen in his long lifetime when their imaginations took over. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, they imagined that Engine Robert's wheels started turning. He started moving, all on his own. "Oh boy," said Mr. Hummus. "Well, where do you think he's going? We gotta stop the Old Engine Robert, Froggy, before he becomes a runaway train." Froggy looked around for help, but there was none to be found. Everyone was too engrossed in the exhibition. Everybody was ignoring the Old Engine Robert, just like always. "I think it's up to us, guys," Froggy said to Baby the Gator, Wormbird, and Mr. Hummus. "If we don't do it, nobody is going to catch this train." And so they jumped into action. The Engine Robert was rolling slowly down the hill away from the farm, but he was picking up speed by the second. And what's worse, he was plowing directly toward Farmer Wilbur's biggest corn patch. If they didn't stop the train soon, Farmer Wilbur's crop would be ruined by the runaway Engine Robert. The boys had to think quickly if they wanted to save the crops. "Quick, Wormbird," Froggy the Gator said. "Use your bug wings to fly us over the train toward the cornfield. I have an idea." And with that, Wormbird scooped up Mr. Hummus, Baby the Gator, and Froggy the Gator and zipped them over the top of the runaway Engine Robert. They landed like superheroes on the other side of the train, right at the entrance to the cornfield. "Great work, Wormbird," Froggy said. "Now we're gonna have to confuse him." "How are we gonna do that?" Mr. Hummus said. "How are we gonna confuse the Old Engine Robert? He'll be here any second. He's picking up speed. Look at him go. We have to act fast." "Just follow my lead," said Froggy, as he jumped into the cornfield and got to work. Froggy the Gator expertly ran through the cornfield, trampling down big stalks and pressing them into the ground as he went. He zigged and he zagged. He made seemingly random turns, all the while trampling down a path of corn stalks. "Wait a minute," Wormbird said. "I think I get it. You're making a maze, aren't you, Froggy? You're making a corn maze to confuse the Engine Robert." "Bingo," said Froggy the Gator, and just then, the old neglected Engine Robert came barreling toward the mouth of the cornfield and toward the entrance to Froggy's makeshift corn maze. The old Engine Robert immediately slowed down, realizing he would have to figure out a way to navigate the surprise maze. He tried to turn and follow the twists of the maze, and he huffed and puffed with steam billowing out of his smokestack, but he couldn't figure a way out. After a few turns and a few zigs and a few zags, the old Engine Robert found himself at a dead end. He stopped, out of breath, his smokestack wheezing and sputtering in defeat. And just then, again in their imaginations, they saw Daddy the Gator and Farmer Wilbur running down the hill toward where the Engine Robert had sputtered out and was now sitting still alone in the cornfield. "You did it, boys," Farmer Wilbur said. "You saved my corn patch. Even though you had to break a few stalks to make the maze, I'm much better off than if the Engine Robert had been allowed to run freely through the field. Sure, you broke a few eggs, but you made yourselves an omelet." Daddy the Gator chimed in. "I'm really glad you boys are safe. You know, in real life, in non-imagination times, you should never ever go near a train track, especially without your parents' supervision." "You're right, we know," said Froggy the Gator, "but it sure was fun to pretend this time." "Hey, Farmer Wilbur," Froggy continued, "there's something I've been thinking about that you said. You mentioned that the old Engine Robert is often acting out, like he does this kind of thing frequently. Why do you think that is?" Farmer Wilbur rubbed his chin contemplatively. You know, boys, I never thought about it before, but Old Engine Robert is always the most neglected train at the festival. Everybody kind of ignores him in favor of the newer, shinier, bigger trains. I reckon he might act out because he feels a little bit hurt. He wishes he got the attention that the other trains got, so he does something that he knows is going to demand attention. And I guess that's a little bit how life works, Farmer Wilbert continued. The people act out when they aren't getting their needs met. So if we want to get along with each other, we should always try to communicate with each other so we can figure out what's really going on. Thank you, everybody, for listening, as always. You might have heard my kids in the background of this recording because they're outside playing because it's so beautiful outside. I'm going to go join them, but one more quick special personal request. If you like Froggy the Gator, if you've enjoyed it so far, and you want to help the show grow, please make sure you're following us on your podcast app of choice. Please make sure that you've rated us and consider leaving us a review as well. And of course, if you're a kid listening to this, make sure you get your parents' permission first. Froggy the Gator and Mr. Hummus sat buckled in the back of Daddy the Gator's car. Oh boy, Froggy the Gator said, we're getting close. I can't wait. Me either, said Mr. Hummus. This is going to be the best day ever. Daddy the Gator just sat in the front seat and smiled as he glanced back in the rearview mirror and saw Mr. Hummus and Froggy bouncing up and down with enthusiasm in the back seat. We're almost there, boys, Daddy the Gator said as they turned up the familiar country road toward Farmer Wilbur's farm. That's right, today was the day. Today, Froggy and Mr. Hummus were riding with Daddy the Gator to Farmer Wilbur's farm for Farmer Wilbur's annual legendary hayride. In case you forgot, Farmer Wilbur was one of Daddy the Gator's oldest friends, and he had a farm outside of Gator Grove where he grew hay, corn, and bees. Froggy the Gator got to visit the farm fairly often, and every time he did, he had a blast. Because every time he visited, Froggy the Gator got to see and ride on awesome farm equipment and trucks and even trains. He got to see farm animals and he got to see crops and scarecrows. In fact, visiting Farmer Wilbur's farm was one of Froggy the Gator's favorite things to do, and he couldn't wait for today's activity, the fabled and famous hayride. Daddy the Gator pulled into Farmer Wilbur's driveway as Farmer Wilbur waved and welcomed them to the farm. I'm glad you fellas made it, Farmer Wilbur said. The hayride is about to begin. Froggy the Gator and Mr. Hummus jumped out of the car as fast as they could, and immediately they saw it. A huge truck, I mean an enormous truck, sat out in front of Farmer Wilbur's house. The truck was green, with big glass headlights, a rusty green hood and rusty green top, and a big truck bed that Froggy guessed could haul just about anything you would ever want to haul. And then, the pièce de résistance, attached to the truck, was a huge wooden trailer, big enough for probably 20 people, and it was stacked 10 feet high full of hay bales. They stood back and they looked at the truck and the trailer. Oh my gosh, said Froggy. It's beautiful. Mr. Hummus didn't say anything because he was speechless, just staring at the trailer. Then Froggy said, I can't believe we get to sit on those hay bales and that we get to ride in this trailer. Let's go, Mr. Hummus. And the boys jumped into the trailer and climbed up to the top of the hay bales and got ready for the ride. Farmer Wilbur and Daddy the Gator sat in the truck itself as they were going to be doing the driving, and Farmer Wilbur called back to Froggy and Mr. Hummus in the trailer. Are you boys ready to ride? Farmer Wilbur said. Hang on tight, because here we go. And just like that, they were off. The truck pulled out of its parking spot, and rumbled ahead on the dirt roads crisscrossing Farmer Wilbur's property. The trailer bumped up and down, and Froggy and Mr. Hummus laughed and smiled as the wind whipped past them, and they stared out in the open fields, enjoying the ride and enjoying the sunshine. They drove to one of Farmer Wilbur's cornfields. Then they drove past Farmer Wilbur's beehives, and they drove all over the property, seeing Farmer Wilbur's dogs and his horses and the birds in the sky. It really was the best day ever. And then, in the distance, ahead of the truck, Froggy the Gator noticed something. "Is that," Froggy the Gator said, "is that the old scarecrow again?" And Froggy was so lost in his thoughts that his imagination started going wild, and Mr. Hummus, of course, as always, played along. "Yeah, I think it is, Froggy. I think that's Farmer Wilbur's scarecrow, and I think he's come to life and he's running toward us." As they approached the scarecrow, Farmer Wilbur slowed down. "It's time to get out, boys, and take a break," he called back to Froggy and Mr. Hummus. How convenient, they thought, as they hopped down from the hay bales and walked up to the scarecrow. In their minds, the scarecrow spoke to them. "Boys, I've been waiting for you. You're just the two guys I needed to see. I need your help." "Well, hey there, Mr. Scarecrow," Froggy the Gator said. "Of course, we're happy to help. What seems to be the problem?" "Well," said the scarecrow, "this is the problem." And he lifted up his arms and started waving them around in the air. As he did, Froggy the Gator and Mr. Hummus noticed his sleeves flopping around like rags. Froggy the Gator immediately knew what was wrong. "Oh no," Froggy said. "Your arms! What happened?" "That's right," said the scarecrow. "You see, all the hay has fallen out of my arms. So now I just have these floppy sleeves, and I can't do my job of scaring the crows because I don't have any hay in my arms. So I've been waiting for you boys to get here with the hayride. Do you think you could fetch some hay and help refill my arms for me?" Froggy the Gator looked back at the truck and the trailer. This was a job they were perfectly suited for. "Of course we can help, Mr. Scarecrow," Froggy the Gator said. "Watch this." And with that, Froggy and Mr. Hummus rushed back to the truck and started collecting as much hay as they could. They grabbed handfuls of hay at a time, and they stuffed it under their arms and in their shirts, and they carried it on their backs, and when they had as much as they could possibly hold, they heaved it back over to their friend, the Scarecrow. "Here you go, Scarecrow," Froggy the Gator said. "This should be enough hay. What do you need from us now? How can we help you regain the use of your arms?" "Oh my, that's perfect," said the Scarecrow. "All I need now is if you could just take that hay and help stuff it into my sleeves. If you do that, I'll be back to normal in no time." So, of course, Froggy the Gator and Mr. Hummus did just that. They grabbed handfuls of their hay and filled the Scarecrow's sleeves, and after a couple of minutes, the Scarecrow was back to his normal self. My boys," the Scarecrow said, "I don't know how I can thank you," as he raised his now hay-filled arms high in the air enthusiastically. "You've helped me more than you can know. And now that I have my arms back, I can do this." And just then, the Scarecrow pulled out a mandolin, which is like a small guitar, kind of like the size of a violin, but you pluck it and you play it like a guitar, and the Scarecrow started playing the most beautiful song that either of the boys had ever heard. He strummed and he plucked and he picked the mandolin as he walked back with the boys to the hay truck in the trailer, and Froggy the Gator and Mr. Hummus carried the beautiful country music with them as they rode, sitting on top of the hay on Farmer Wilbur's farm at his legendary famous hayride. Hey everybody, this is Harrison. I'm the creator of Froggy the Gator. Thank you as always for listening. If you're listening on Spotify, there is a poll attached to this episode. If you could take a second and answer the question in the poll, it would really help us as we create more episodes for everybody. And as always, of course, if you get value out of these, if you enjoy these, if you're a fan of Froggy the Gator and you want to help the show grow, the best thing you can do is to be following us on your podcast app of choice and take a second and leave us a review. Thanks as always, everybody. We will talk soon. You're not going to believe this, and Froggy the Gator didn't believe it either. But today, his dad surprised him with an announcement. "Hey, Froggy," Daddy the Gator said when he woke Froggy up in the morning. "We're doing something really special today. Today, we're going to Farmer Wilbur's farm, and he's going to let you and your friends ride some horses. How's that sound?" Froggy could hardly believe his luck. "How's that sound?" he asked. "It sounds great." So Froggy the Gator quickly got dressed. He put on his favorite cowboy hat, his favorite cowboy boots, and his favorite flannel plaid shirt. It was getting cooler outside now that autumn was arriving, and he jumped in Daddy the Gator's car to head to Farmer Wilbur's farm. After they picked up Froggy's friends Mr. Hummus and Wormbird, they pulled up to Farmer Wilbur's familiar driveway and drove up the hill to his stables. "Welcome, boys," Farmer Wilbur said. "Are you ready to ride some horses today?" "Are we ever," Froggy said, as the boys ran to pick out their favorite horses. At this point, there was no denying it. Their imaginations were going to create some sort of incredible scenario, given how much fun riding horses was going to be, and unsurprisingly, that is exactly what happened next. Froggy looked at his friends. "Well, boys," he said, "it looks like we are officially cowboys today," as he tipped his cowboy hat and put a piece of hay into his mouth like the real cowboys used to do. "I reckon I'm gonna ride this beautiful brown mare right here." And Froggy the Gator hopped up on a brown horse with a white diamond patch of fur between her eyes. "I think I'll call her Brown Beauty," Froggy said to his friends. Mr. Hummus walked up to a white horse with gray patches all over it. "I reckon I'm gonna ride this one," he said to his friends. "I'll call him Patches." Then Wormbird walked up to a golden yellow-brown horse with a pitch black mane. "I'll call mine Goldie," Wormbird said. And with that, the boys were mounted on their horses and ready to start their adventure. In their minds, the landscape of Farmer Wilbur's farm started to transform into a vast, wild, western desert. There was sand as far as the eye could see, and red clay rocks, and a big orange sun setting off to the west. The boys rode their horses as fast as they could out toward the horizon. The horizon is where the sky meets the earth. They rode toward the horizon as fast as they could, and they were having a great time, but then something happened. Off in the distance, they saw a big wooden sign. They rode their horses, Brown Beauty, Patches, and Goldie, closer to the sign, and then they read it. "Welcome to the home of the Golden Hay Bale. This golden hay bale gives whoever possesses it prosperity." Prosperity means you're basically living happily and fulfilled, and you don't have to worry, and you get what you want out of life. Whoever possesses this golden hay bale gets prosperity, but it has been missing for over 100 years. It disappeared in the Cactus Cavern 1 mile to the west. If you find it, you will enjoy prosperity forever. "Wow," Froggy the Gator said to his friends. "Did you guys hear that? If we find this golden hay bale, we'll have good luck forever. We gotta find it. We gotta go to the Cactus Caverns right now." And just like that, they were off. Almost immediately, though, they were met with a challenge. They were riding their horses quickly across the desert plain when a huge gust of wind came out of nowhere. Sand started blowing all around them, and huge tumbleweeds started rolling directly toward the boys and their horses. "Oh no!" Froggy shouted. "Guys, we gotta get out of the way of these tumbleweeds, or our horses will trip and fall." So they did some quick thinking. "Hurry, guys, let's get in a straight line. Everybody file in behind me," Froggy the Gator said. And the friends all narrowed their exposure by lining up in a straight line, and they were able to get past the tumbleweeds without tripping. "That was a close one," Mr. Hummus said, after they'd passed the tumbleweeds and the wind had calmed down. "Nice thinking, Froggy." "No problem, Mr. Hummus," Froggy the Gator said, as he and Wormbird rode their horses ahead. "And right back at you with the quick maneuvering, Mr. Hummus," Froggy said to his friend. But there was a problem, because when Froggy said that, Mr. Hummus didn't respond. "Mr. Hummus?" Froggy the Gator said. "Mr. Hummus, where are you?" Then he and Wormbird stopped their horses and they looked behind them. To their dismay, they saw their second challenge. Mr. Hummus hadn't responded because Mr. Hummus had fallen behind, and he and his horse Patches had gotten stuck in quicksand. "Oh no," Froggy said to Wormbird. "Mr. Hummus is stuck in quicksand. We gotta go back and help him." So Wormbird and Froggy the Gator rode their horses, Brown Beauty and Goldie, as fast as they could back to Mr. Hummus and Patches, who was struggling in the sand and unable to lift itself out. "We gotta think quick again," Froggy said, and then he remembered something that all good cowboys carry. "Wormbird, check your saddle. Do you by chance have a lasso handy?" Wormbird looked, and sure enough, he had a lasso sitting right there attached to his saddle. "I sure do, Froggy," Wormbird said, and Wormbird spun the lasso high above his head and then tossed it to Mr. Hummus. Mr. Hummus caught the lasso and quickly tied it around his horse Patches, and Wormbird and Froggy rode their horses and pulled Mr. Hummus and Patches out of the quicksand. "Phew," said Froggy. "That was another close one, but we made it out." And as soon as they realized that they were out of the sand, they turned around and saw it. It was the Cactus Cavern. Right in front of them. They'd made it. Finally. So they went inside, and almost immediately they saw what they'd come for. Because right there in front of them, in the back of the cavern, sat a glowing, golden hay bale. Just what they'd been looking for this whole time. "Oh boy, fellas," Froggy said, "we did it." And they rushed over to grab the hay bale and get their good luck and good fortune and prosperity, but as soon as they did, something strange happened. The hay bale disappeared, and in its place, they found a simple, short note. "What's going on, Froggy?" Mr. Hummus said. "What happened to the hay bale?" "I'm not sure," Froggy responded, and he held the note up to the light so they could read it. And on the note, it said, "If you found this note, it means you found prosperity. But your reward is knowing this. Prosperity is something that you already had. Prosperity is the journey here and the friendship that carried you this far." "Wow," said Froggy. "I guess we had prosperity this whole time. I guess that means we should just keep having adventures and keep having each other's backs, and we'll be right where we're supposed to be." And with that, the friends rode their horses off into the imaginary sunset. They traversed the imaginary desert, and they went back to Farmer Wilbur's farm, where they found Daddy the Gator waiting with a nice cold pitcher of lemonade. If you know anything about Froggy the Gator, you know that he loves going to Farmer Wilbur's farm. And in case you forgot, Farmer Wilbur is one of Daddy the Gator's oldest friends, and he has a farm outside of Gator Grove where he grows hay, corn, and bees for honey. Every so often, Daddy the Gator brings Froggy and his friends out to the farm to check out the farm equipment and get outside and enjoy the great outdoors away from town. And as you may also know, right now, the seasons are changing. And if you live in the Northern Hemisphere means if you imagine the Earth, imagine the globe, and you just took the top half of that globe. If you live in the Northern Hemisphere, that means summer is ending and fall is arriving. And that means the leaves change color, the air gets cooler, the days get shorter, and all of the great autumnal traditions come back around on the calendar once again. And one of Froggy the Gator's favorite fall traditions is the annual Gator Grove Harvest Festival, held every year at, you guessed it, Farmer Wilbur's farm. "Froggy!" Daddy the Gator hollered from the kitchen. "It's time to head out to Farmer Wilbur's farm. The Harvest Festival day is here." Froggy the Gator jumped out of bed. He couldn't wait. He'd been waiting all summer for this day. So he got dressed as quickly as he could, and he flew downstairs to get in the car and head to Farmer Wilbur's farm. When they arrived at the farm, they saw Mr. Hummus, Wormbird, and Tomato Hedgehog already there with their parents. Froggy ran to say hello to his friends. "Guys," Froggy the Gator said, "it's finally here. The Harvest Festival is finally here. What do you want to do first?" "I want to check out the pumpkin race," Mr. Hummus said. "Well, I want to look at the corn maze," Wormbird responded. "And I want to do the hayride," Tomato Hedgehog said. Daddy the Gator overheard the conversation and chimed in. "You boys can do all of the above and more," he said, "but just to make sure you save some room for Farmer Wilbur's famous pecan pie." So the guys set off to see all the Harvest Festival had to offer. First, they came to a bobbing for apples station. Bobbing for apples is when you stick your head in a bucket of water that has apples floating in it, and you try to bite into one of the apples and bring it up above the water. All the guys tried the bobbing for apples, but it was way more difficult than they thought it would be. Farmer Wilbur watched them struggling and he ran over. "Hey, fellas, don't worry if you can't get any apples this way, because right over here I have my famous candied apples that you can try." So the guys all got candied apples, which are apples on a stick covered in caramel and nuts or chocolate or some other great treat, and they went around on to the rest of the Harvest Festival. Then they came to what Wormbird had been hoping to see. It was the corn maze. They walked up to the entrance of the corn maze and they stepped right in. Inside, there were all kinds of twists and turns and different ways they could navigate the maze. In their imaginations, they pretended that they were in an ancient labyrinth, guarded by a powerful Minotaur, which is like a half-man, half-bull, and they ran as fast as they could away from the ferocious beast until they found the exit. They laughed and laughed at how much fun they had in the corn maze when they came across Mr. Hummus's favorite activity. "Look, fellas," Mr. Hummus said, It's the pumpkin race." And if you don't know what a pumpkin race is, it's where every competitor gets a pumpkin and they get to decorate it however they like. They paint faces on them and they put hair on them in the form of hay, and then they roll the pumpkins down a hill. Whoever's pumpkin gets down the hill first wins. So the guys all got their pumpkins looking perfect, and they lined up to roll them down the hill. As they did, the pumpkins tumbled over each other, the Wormbird's pumpkin actually broke in half, and finally, after they'd all rolled and jumped down the hill, Mr. Hummus's pumpkin made it to the bottom first. "You did it!" Froggy the Gator cheered for his friend, and Mr. Hummus took his prize, a big blue ribbon, as the champion of the pumpkin race. "What's next, guys?" Froggy the Gator said to his friends. And just as he said that, they heard the unmistakable sound of a big truck engine. They turned around, and what did they see? Well, it was Farmer Wilbur's big old red truck. It was as big as a house, the guys reckoned, and on the back of it, it had a trailer attached that was stacked to the sky with huge hay bales. "Oh yes," said Tomato Hedgehog, "it's time for the hayride." So all the guys climbed up on the trailer and sat down on one of the big hay bales, and the truck started driving all around the farm. They drove past the corn maze, then they drove past some big corn fields off on the edge of the farm. They drove past the hay fields where Farmer Wilbur grew his hay that he baled and then sold for people to feed to their horses. Then they drove past the apiary where Farmer Wilbur's bees lived, and all the guys watched as the busy bees bustled around the hives, making delicious honey that Farmer Wilbur would bottle up and sell. "This is the best day ever," Froggy the Gator said, "and it's the best harvest festival I've ever been to." Everything was going great, and just as the tractor ride was coming to an end, Mr. Hummus looked over at his friend Froggy the Gator. "Hey, Froggy," Mr. Hummus said, "we all got to do the stuff that we wanted to do today. I got to go to the pumpkin race, Wormbird got to do the corn maze, and Tomato Hedgehog got to do the hayride. But you never told us what you were most excited about. What is it that you want to do at the Harvest Festival, Froggy? We want to make sure that you have as much fun as we have." Froggy the Gator thought for a minute. Then, as the guys were climbing down off the hayride trailer, he finally spoke. "You know what, guys?" Froggy began. "Today has been perfect. I can't think of anything else that I'd rather have done. The best part of the Harvest Festival is what we're doing right now. The best part of the Harvest Festival for me is getting to hang out with my dad and my friends and be outside at this great farm." Daddy the Gator couldn't help but overhear what Froggy the Gator had said. "That sounds great, son," Daddy the Gator responded, "and I'm proud of you for having that outlook on today. But don't forget, there's one more thing we have to do today, and that might actually wind up being your favorite part after all." "What's that, Dad?" Froggy the Gator said. And before Daddy the Gator could answer, Farmer Wilbur rang a dinner bell and shouted so that all the guests could hear. "Hey everybody," Farmer Wilbur said. "Come and gather around. It's time to dig into our fresh pecan pie." Daddy the Gator smiled at Froggy, and then he said, "You guessed it, son. As great as today's been, it's about to get even better. Now let's go eat some pie before we head home from the best harvest festival yet." Froggy the Gator woke up and knew he was in for another fun fall day. Today he was headed back to Farmer Wilbur's farm, who, if you don't remember, is one of Daddy the Gator's oldest friends. Farmer Wilbur has a farm outside Gator Grove, and he often invites Froggy and his dad to come to the farm to check out the big cool tractors and hang out and enjoy being outdoors. Farmer Wilbur also hosts, if you'll recall, a legendary fall festival every year in Gator Grove. And today, Froggy was going to the fall festival with his dad and his friends, Mr. Hummus, Wormbird, and Tomato Hedgehog. And although there were a ton of activities to do at the fall festival, the one the boys were the most excited about was the world-renowned corn maze, which is basically a big maze made out of corn stalks where you walk around and you try to get from one end of the maze to the other. When they arrived at Farmer Wilbur's farm, they got out of the car immediately and dashed to the corn maze. At the entrance, they saw Farmer Wilbur standing there. "Good morning, boys," Farmer Wilbur said. "This year's maze is a doozy. Make sure you don't get lost in there, and if you do, remember, you're always safer if you stick in groups and ask for help." "Sure thing, Farmer Wilbur," Froggy said as he and his friends dashed into the maze. As they were walking into the beginning of the maze, Froggy remarked to his friends, "Man, Farmer Wilbur is great, but I don't know what he was going on about back there. There's no way we get lost in this maze. We're the best maze navigators I know." And so the boys set off on their journey, which would soon turn into one they would never forget. As we all know, the friends have quite the active imaginations. And at home school, Mr. Hummus had recently been learning a lot about these mythical creatures called Minotaurs. A Minotaur is like a half bull, half man. It has a bull head with big horns on its head and the arms and legs of a regular guy. And they guard these things called labyrinths, which are basically mazes. In other words, basically just like what the guys were walking in now. And Mr. Hummus had been telling his friends all about Minotaurs and how cool they were as far as mythical creatures go when the friends heard something shuffle in the cornstalks right ahead of them. The noise stopped the guys in their tracks. "Wait a minute," said Mr. Hummus. Do you think that could be the corn maze Minotaur? Do you think he's here to keep us from getting out of the maze?" "Oh boy," said Froggy, "I don't know, but I don't want to find out." So the guys immediately turned around and ran in the other direction. But as they did, unbeknownst to the boys, they weren't really paying attention to where they were going, and all of a sudden, they'd lost track of which turns and zigs and zags they'd made into the maze so far. But they were too busy pretending to run from the Minotaur to notice, so they kept on going deeper and deeper into the maze. Then, they saw a big dark storm cloud form overhead. "Oh no," said Froggy, "is it gonna rain on us while we're in the maze?" "I don't think so, Froggy," Mr. Hummus said, "because I think that cloud is actually the Minotaur's shadow. He's still here and he's come back from us." And in their imaginations, the guys saw a huge, menacing Minotaur with the head and horns of a bull and the body of a man emerging from the cloud and floating down into the maze. "Halt," said the Minotaur. "Stop where you are. There will be no escaping my maze." And he had a big stick with him like a bow staff, and he waved it around in the air as he started walking toward the boys. "Oh no," said Froggy, "the Minotaur has come for us. Let's run." So the guys, knowing it was all pretend and continuing to have fun in the maze, ran and ran from turn to turn, corner to corner, until all of a sudden, winded and out of breath, they stopped and they looked around and they realized they had no idea where they were in the maze anymore. "Wait a minute, guys. Let's get serious for a second," Wormbird said. "No more pretending. Does anyone know where we are right now?" And they looked left, they looked right, and they didn't recognize this part of the maze at all. They had to admit it to themselves that in all of their fun running from the pretend Minotaur, they'd gotten themselves lost. "Oh, no, no, no," said Tomato Hedgehog. "What are we gonna do? We've got to get out of here. I don't want to be trapped in here forever." "It's okay," said Froggy. "Take a deep breath, Tomato Hedgehog. We aren't gonna be trapped forever. We just have to remember what Farmer Wilbur said. He told us right before we walked into the maze. He said, 'You're always better sticking in groups, and don't be afraid to ask for help.' So that's what we gotta do," Froggy continued. "We gotta stick together and see if there's anybody that can help us." So the boys all started shouting at the same time, being as brave as they could, even though they were getting more worried by the second. "Hello," they shouted. "We're lost in the maze. Is anybody out there?" They shouted for a few minutes, and they'd almost lost hope, when all of a sudden, they heard a familiar voice from the other side of a row of cornstalks. "Froggy," the voice said. "Mr. Hummus," the voice continued. "Is that you guys?" And Froggy immediately felt a wave of relief wash over him. He recognized that voice, and he pulled apart the row of cornstalks separating his friends from the voice, and there he saw their old pal, Tara Pterodactyl, walking through the maze with her mom, Mrs. Pterodactyl. "Oh boy, are you a sight for sore eyes," Froggy said to Tara. "We're lost in this maze. Can you help us get out?" "Of course we can," said Mrs. Pterodactyl. "We've done this maze a couple of times already today. The exit is right this way." So Froggy and his friends walked with Tara Pterodactyl and her mom and quickly found the exit, where they saw Farmer Wilbur waiting for them. "Hey, Farmer Wilbur," Froggy said when they emerged from the corn maze. "That was quite a maze this year. We pretended we were running from a fierce Minotaur, and we were having so much fun that we actually got lost. I didn't think it was possible, but we did. And luckily, we remembered what you said at the beginning. You said to stick together and not be afraid to ask for help, which is how we found Tara and her mom, who helped us get out." Farmer Wilbur just smiled. "I'm glad, boys," he said, as Froggy and his friends waved to Daddy the Gator, who was approaching the maze exit as well. "You did the right thing, and you showed a lot of bravery today," Farmer Wilbur said. "Bravery?" Froggy responded. But we got lost. How is that brave?" Daddy the Gator and Farmer Wilbur looked at each other, and Daddy the Gator smiled and nodded at Farmer Wilbur, who spoke up again. "Sometimes, guys," Farmer Wilbur said, "being brave is knowing when to ask for help. Because we all get lost sometimes in life, and it's the times we feel the most lost that we need to lean in to the people closest to us, just like you guys did when you stuck together. And it's not always going to feel very brave to ask for help, but sometimes it's the bravest thing you can do, because sometimes it's just what you need to get back on track and get out of the maze you're in." Today's episode of Froggy the Gator was co-written by our listener, Cyrus. If you want to help write an episode, head over to this episode on Spotify and fill out the attached Q&A, and we'll publish your episode idea soon. It was an autumn Saturday afternoon in Gator Grove. It was just a couple of days after Halloween, and the leaves on all the trees were now falling off rapidly. Everywhere Froggy the Gator looked, he saw reds and yellows and oranges and browns, leaves whisking through the breeze, flying all around. The air was chilly, and Froggy had to wear gloves. It was the coldest day since last winter, and Froggy could see his breath in the air like little clouds. He was imagining that he was a train conductor, and his breath was tufts of steam coming out of the engine as he powered around on an imaginary train track. But just then, he was brought back to reality. Whack! Whack! Froggy heard. He snapped his head around to the sound. It was Daddy the Gator, and the whacking sound was Daddy the Gator's maul axe splitting a huge log of wood a few feet away. You see, Daddy the Gator and Froggy the Gator were at Farmer Wilbur's farm, who you may remember is one of Daddy the Gator's oldest friends, and who has a farm outside Gator Grove where he grows hay, corn, and bees. Farmer Wilbur has a bunch of wild forest on his property, and every year he invites Daddy the Gator to come chop wood for the Gator family to use as firewood in the winter. This was the first year where Daddy the Gator had invited Froggy to come along with him on the wood chopping trip. And Froggy was really excited to use an axe and chop wood and stack wood and pretend that he was like some kind of big, strong lumberjack guy. "Come on over here, son," Daddy the Gator said. "Look at this big oak log we're working on. You know, oak is one of the best trees for burning in our fireplace and wood stove at home because it's dense, which means it burns for a long time at really high temperatures, and it doesn't produce a lot of creosote, which is kind of like a black gunk left over from burning wood that we don't want in our stove or in our fireplace." Daddy the Gator took a couple more powerful swings of the axe, and Froggy watched as the wood logs easily split in two. Wow, thought Froggy, my dad is good at this. Do you want to take a swing, son? Daddy the Gator said to Froggy. Come on over here. And remember, only use an axe like this when I'm around, because they're really heavy and you can hurt yourself if you're not careful. That's why you always need to have my supervision. But since I'm here right now, why don't you take a swing? Froggy picked up the huge axe. He tried to lift it over his head, but he could barely get it off the ground. It was way heavier than he expected. Oh boy, Froggy said to his dad, I knew it would be heavy, but I don't know how I can get this thing up in the air. Daddy the Gator just smiled. I know, son. It's heavy because the weight is what helps it split the wood so easily. But you gotta be strong to swing it. Here, let me help you. So Daddy the Gator helped Froggy lift the axe high up over his head, and wham! Brought it down on a log, sending the log splitting into two, and the two pieces flying off in either direction. Great one, son, Daddy the Gator said. You're a natural at this. Froggy the Gator knew he should feel proud, but he was actually kind of embarrassed. Thanks, Dad, but I only split that log because you helped me. I wish I could do it on my own. Don't worry, son, Daddy the Gator replied. You're just a kid, and as the years go by, you'll get stronger and stronger, and soon you'll be splitting logs all by yourself. But in the meantime, the best way you can help today is by stacking all the logs that I split. Are you ready to help do that? Sure thing, Froggy the Gator said, but what does that mean? How do I do it? So Daddy the Gator explained that they needed to stack what was called a cord of wood, which basically means a lot of wood, because it means it has to be 4 feet tall, 4 feet wide, and 8 feet long, which is about as big as a car. This cord is what will burn in our wood stove and our fireplace this winter to help keep us warm and toasty. And all you need to do is stack the wood that I chop in nice, orderly piles, like this. And Daddy the Gator demonstrated what a properly stacked log looks like. Are you ready? Daddy the Gator said. Let's go. So they got to work. Daddy the Gator chopping and Froggy the Gator stacking, and everything was going great at first, but soon Froggy began to notice that he was getting pretty tired. A cord was a lot of wood after all, and it felt like no matter how much he stacked, their pile wasn't getting any bigger. Oh, we're gonna be here all day, Froggy the Gator thought to himself. And Daddy the Gator noticed that Froggy seemed to be slowing down. How are you feeling, son? Daddy the Gator said. It's a lot of wood, isn't it? Yeah, said Froggy the Gator, and I'm doing okay. It's just more than I thought it would be. I understand, said Daddy the Gator. You know what always helps me when I'm feeling overwhelmed by a task like this? I turn it into a game. And Froggy the Gator liked the sound of that. And Daddy the Gator continued, let's pretend we're building a huge wood castle. And you have to stack the logs of the castle perfectly because there's a scary dragon in those woods just over there. And if we don't stack the logs right, the dragon will get us. Oh no, laughed Froggy the Gator. A dragon? We gotta watch out for those, I know that. And with that, Froggy the Gator got back to work, stacking the wood and fortifying his wood castle from the fierce dragon that he imagined lurking just off in the edge of the woods. He stacked and he stacked, and he never even felt tired, because now he knew the work had an obvious purpose. He didn't want the dragon to win, so he stacked some more, and then some more, and before he knew it, the entire cord of wood was stacked, perfectly even and organized. Well, would you look at that, Daddy the Gator said as he caught his breath. Both Daddy the Gator and Froggy the Gator were sweating, even though it was chilly outside. You did it, son. Your castle is complete. The kingdom is safe from the dragon. And Froggy took a step back to admire their hard work. It truly was a sight to behold. He noticed a distinct feeling of accomplishment as he looked at their chopped wood. He felt good about himself. Wow, Dad, Froggy said. That actually didn't even feel like work. And looking at this wood makes me feel really good. I didn't expect that, but I feel happy just looking at what we achieved today." Daddy the Gator smiled knowingly and nodded. "That's right, son. What you're feeling is how it always feels after you do good, hard work. And it's one of the most important feelings in the world, because it means you accomplished something. It means you did something meaningful. And as long as you have that feeling, you know you're on the right path in life." That night, back at the Gator's house, they fired up the wood stove with some of their freshly cut wood. It was a little harder to burn since it was so freshly cut, but they did it anyway because Froggy really wanted to. And Froggy warmed his toes by the fire, and he thought to himself about all of the good, hard work he'd get to do in the future. The end.